today's live event. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me on time. My name is Olutoyin Williams. I'm an HR professional who specializes in supporting other HR professionals to get to the top of their careers. This evening, we're having the conversation around quiet quitting or quiet firing. What can HR professionals do about it? It's a trend that came up post-COVID, quiet quitting, where many organizations would have employees who are on the job but have refused to do beyond the bare minimum and are setting really clear boundaries in order to establish some form of work-life balance. And what this means is that basically the employees are still doing what is required of them, but they are rejecting the hustle culture that have come to be a mainstay of recent times, just needed and promoted by organizations that want organizations where they want employees to really stand up and stand out from the crowd. In organizations like that, line managers would really want to find employees that are really going over and beyond, working harder than normal, staying and closing at regular hours, irregular hours, just to be, seated in that organization. But many organizations have employees that are now saying no to that. And what it is being called is quiet quitting, where they're just doing the minimum. And on the other hand of the divide, we have quiet firing. What is quiet firing? Quiet firing is just like quiet quitting, but then this is on the employer side, where the employer begins to think of ways to reduce their interactions with employees. So instead of directly firing such employees from the organization, they would quiet fire, which would be to treat the employee so poorly that they are disengaged to the point where the employee would then quit on their own. I mean, examples of that, not positives, are examples where there are little or no salary increases over a long period of time, micromanaging the employee, lack of respect for the employee, leaving the employee out of meetings, giving reduced hours without explanation, giving very little time off, singling out the employee to ask tough questions in meetings, or just increasing workload without pay, leaving them out of social gatherings, and keeping the employee out of the loop of things that are happening in the organization. This is what is meant by quiet firing. Now, the question is, if you are an HR professional and you're listening in to this audio event, how do you manage these two different types of scenarios in your organization? How do you manage it? How do you ensure that you're not having a situation where employees have to resort to quiet quitting, or you're in a situation where the management of the organization has resorted to quiet firing in order to tackle some employee challenges or deal with some unpleasant situations? So let's talk about this conversation first from the perspective of the HR professional. And again, as an HR professional with 14 years of experience, I am quite keen on supporting other HR professionals to remain on top of their game and provide the right kind of advice for their organizations to continue to succeed. If you're an HR professional and you're listening to me and you would love to engage with me beyond this audio event, please put the word engage in the comments and I'll be able to reach out to you after this conversation. If you haven't been following me before or you're not connected with me, please just click on my picture and you would be able to send me a connection request with the word engage. Then I know that you are an HR professional who is seeking to engage with me. I would be in a position to support you with your HR career going forward. So back to our conversation. In talking about how does an HR professional deal with this situation, one of the first things I would like to point out very clearly is that as an HR professional, you have the responsibility to provide the right advice to the organization. Now, interestingly, as an HR professional, you're always going to be towing the fine line between management and employees. And as such, you need to have your very empathetic hat on. However, you have to be business minded. What do I mean by that? In the world of work, we would typically have a set of activities that we have classified into a job description. Now, it might be that the organization has changed, and because of that change has a knock-on impact on the work that is being done by employees in the organization. How do you, as an HR professional, how do you lead the conversation when such changes are happening, when maybe possibly the organization is experiencing a situation where they need to work longer hours? How do you bring that conversation to the fore and lead it in such a way that the organization is able to take an objective assessment of the situation and decide if they are going to increase salaries, if they are going to expand roles? What's the logical response from the organization to that situation? Now, it's really important that as the HR professional in that situation, you are able to bring up that issue and mention it to management. You don't want to have a situation whereby you're leaving things to chances. You can't leave things to chances. To a large extent, we have to be at the forefront of leading those conversations. So if there is a change in the work structure, if there's a change in the workload, if there's a change in how the roles are being redistributed within the organization, the HR professional in that organization should lead that conversation by pointing it out that there has been a change and we need to address this with employees. Now, the reason why a number of employees would resort to quiet quitting is because they more likely have been in situations where they felt that their inputs are not being respected, their inputs are not being solicited, and their views are not taken on board. It would be unfair in that kind of situation to have an HR professional that is not properly articulating all those objections, all those conversations, and bringing them to the fore with management in a way that is sustainable and in a way that is results driven. So what do I mean? If there's a change in the organization and a way work has been organized, it is up to the head of human resources or whoever is managing the HR function at that point in time to lead the conversation by engaging into a conversation with employees to say this change is happening or this change is anticipated to happen. What's the best way to go about it? So you really want to understand, how do you bring up such conversations? How do you get everyone involved in it in such a way that people then feel heard? Because one of the greatest grievances that employees have when they are working in organizations that they have resorted to quiet quitting is they don't feel heard. How do you ensure that everyone feels heard? How do you ensure that all viewpoints are being sought? Now, in synthesizing all of those inputs, how do you then ensure that you are helping and supporting management to arrive at the right conclusion? Are we in a position to offer pay increase? Are we in a position to offer job enrichment benefits? Are we in a position to offer flexible working in order to compensate for the time that people are spending above and beyond that work? As the HR professional in that scenario, we cannot be irresponsible about it and then sweep such issues under the table, because it does come back to haunt in the instance where you then have employees resorting to quiet quitting. Now, like I said earlier, with quiet quitting, you have employees who are trying to actually set boundaries. So beyond them feeling not heard, it is them also trying to set boundaries. So then the question needs to be addressed. In our organizations as HR professionals, are we in organizations where there is no respect for people's well-being? Are we managing organizations where people's well-being, their mental health, their physical health, their emotional health is being put on the back burner because of organizational objectives? That would be wrong. That would be unfair. That would be impractical. And that would even harm the organization in the long term. All the things that shouldn't happen. So as an HR professional operating in that type of organization, what we then need to do is to champion initiatives that put employees' well-being front and center. How do you do that? By coming up with initiatives that the organization is going to be able to sponsor, that would look after the well-being of the organization and its people. Now, it's really important that I point out to us that in an HR professional, looking into the challenges in the organization in that manner and coming up with initiatives that would help the long-term sustainability of the organization, that's actually a core part of our role as HR professionals. We don't want to be reactionary in our positioning to these things. We want to get into a situation whereby we're being very attuned into what is going on in the organization. Do you have people who used to be very vocal and then suddenly they are not vocal anymore? Do you have people who used to be very interactive, who used to be very, upfront with their opinions in meetings? They are upfront with their ideas around what the organization needs to do in order to move forward, and then all of a sudden they are much more quieter. If you have that scenario, then you need to take action by getting involved and speaking to employees, by creating an opportunity for them to speak one-on-one. Now, interestingly, people would more likely prefer to speak with you on a one-to-one conversation. They would not want to be in a meeting, to be put on the spot, and then ask, why are you not talking? No one is going to respond to that. Have you ever tried it? A situation where you're in a conversation, in a meeting, and some people that are quite frontal with and quite outspoken with their inputs are suddenly quiet, and then you pick on them. It would definitely come across as though you're picking on them. And no one wants to be picked at. No one wants to be picked on. So to get the best out of that situation, you need to create opportunities for people to come and have a conversation with you. And that dovetails into your being approachable. So as an HR professional, if you're listening to me this evening, the question is, how approachable are you? If there are challenges in the organization, do your employees, do they find it easy to approach you and have a conversation with you about the things that are challenging work-wise? Do they have a relationship with you? Are you at that level where you're comfortable with people and people are comfortable with you to tell you what the real challenges are? It would really work to your advantage as an HR person if you develop being more approachable if you're not already approachable. You must be able to have conversations. People must feel safe to have these conversations with you, knowing that the conversations will remain confidential and those confidences will not be broken. And that's a key attribute of an astute HR person. And that's a key attribute that I would like us to look at if we're in HR and we're listening into this conversation today. So we've spoken so far about quiet quitting and why that situation might occur in our organizations. We've spoken about how to deal with it as an HR professional, which is you need to understand what are the factors behind it. If people are quitting quietly because they feel that their views are not being heard, would you then look into initiatives that would make us as an organization appear and actually be more transparent in how we engage our employees to get their feedback and their input on various things that are happening in the organization? That would be definitely something to look into. And if people are quitting or quietly quitting because they feel that their well-being is not priority for the organization, then as the HR professional in that situation, you need to look into employee well-being initiatives that you can propose to management that would support the initiatives that will help management to look into supporting their employees to feel well cared for while in the organization. Remember, if you're an HR professional and you're looking at leveraging and leveling up in your career, I'm here to support you. Please put the word engage in the comment section. Remember to tap on my picture. That way you can connect with me if you haven't been connected with me before. And by putting the word engage in the comment section, I'll be able to find you easily and connect with you and pick up the conversation of how I can support you. So now let's talk about quiet firing. Why would an organization resort to quiet firing? Under what circumstances will an organization resort to quiet firing? Some organizations would sadly resort to quiet firing when they have employee challenges that they do not want to deal with. Interestingly, the HR professional in that scenario has a lot to do, and a lot really borders on their ability to expertly manage the situation. So how can an organization get into a situation where they have employees, but the employees are they are not able to navigate around the employees? It's because there are unresolved challenges in the organization. Let me give you a practical example of what I mean by that. So, for example, there might be a scenario whereby maybe closer to the beginning of the year, the organization had set their targets and had made some commitments about, what bonuses they would pay out or what benefits they would approve if targets have been met. And unfortunately, in the course of the year, again, you know how business works. You make some targets, you set some targets at the beginning of the year. It might turn out that closer to the end of the year or towards the middle of the year, the economic situation has changed so rapidly that the organization is not able to meet that target. In that scenario, what then do you do? As the HR person in that situation, you need to lead the conversation. You need to lead the conversation and be able to bring up such issues in a way that we can discuss it as a company, in a way that we can bring some solutions about it together. Now, the interesting thing is that most times when organizations face challenges with meeting their targets, their corporate targets, it's actually a people challenge. Yes, there might be some system challenges that needs to be worked around, maybe product development, maybe marketing, maybe adoption of new technology. But behind product development, market penetration, adoption of new technology are people. So at the end of the day, performance is a people problem. How then does the HR professional in that scenario deal with that performance issue? The very first right thing to do is by actually bringing up the issue and making it a topic. Because if performance has been affected and we're not meeting our targets as an organization, then HR cannot afford to keep quiet about it. HR needs to be able to point out the conversation, bring up alternatives to how we then beef up our performance or how we then adjust the targets, because you can't have the same targets that have been decided at the beginning of the year. During the course of the year, things have moved so rapidly that target is highly unrealistic, maybe because we can't meet it for factors that are outside of our control. Then it's really up to the HR people in that organization to bring up that conversation and readjust the goals. If it's a case of we need more resources allocated, then we make a conversation or give an approval for more resources to be allocated. In no situation should we have a scenario whereby an organization then resorts to quiet firing, wherein you then exclude employees from key events, you isolate employees and make them feel so unwelcome. Rather than let things degenerate to that position, you really need to then understand how to bring up those issues. How do you put those issues front and center? How do you facilitate the conversation? And really, that's the core skill that HR needs to exhibit in that situation. How do you facilitate the conversation? Now, it's interesting that facilitating the conversation isn't a skill that HR people are born with. I hate to disappoint you, but then HR people are not born with just being natural facilitators of difficult situations or difficult conversations. No, we're not. It's actually a skill that we learn as we mature more in our role and in our capability as HR professionals. And that's why one of the things that I use to support my coaching clients is to support them to be able to build up the right capability to function at really senior levels. Because when you have to deal with some outlier situations that has to do with performance across the organization, you need to have the capacity to lead these conversations, to facilitate these conversations and facilitate the solutions to these conversations. And that's not something that HR professionals are naturally born with. It's a skill that they have to develop with time and with coaching, which is one of the things that I use to support my coaching clients. So if you're an HR professional and you're listening into this conversation today and you want to level up in your career, please put the word engage in the comments and I'll be able to find you easily. If you haven't connected with me before, you will need to connect with me, and that you can do by clicking on my picture and sending me a connection request, and thereafter we will be able to have a conversation about how I can support you to be able to level up your career and navigate this difficult situation such as quiet quitting or quiet firing. So I really hope that this conversation has been engaging for you. My idea was to speak to us for about 20 minutes, which we've done now, and just discuss, what quiet quitting is, what quiet firing is, what circumstances can occur in an organization that will make that happen, what the HR professional in that situation can do about it, and how I personally can help. If you've got questions, I'll be more than happy to take them. We still have a few minutes on the clock that I can spend with us. I'll be happy to take them. Otherwise, please reach out to me and I would be more than happy to have a conversation. Although I have prepared one question that I think might be weighing on your mind, which is, why do organizations even get to a position where they need to quiet fire? And I think the reason why organizations get to that position why they need to quiet fire is because they don't have the right structures. And that dovetails into how important it is for an organization that wants to be sustainable to have the right HR structures. So what do I mean by the right HR structures? That means structures that has to do with your policies, structures that has to do with how you deal with grievances, structures that has to do with how you deal with performance and performance-related questions and performance-related challenges. How do you manage such situations when they happen in your organization? Having such structures in place means that when those situations then occur, you're not going to have a knee-jerk reaction. You're not going to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. You're not going to allow your individual bias to get into the process of you dealing with that in a really objective manner. So as HR professionals, we do have the responsibility to support our organizations to have the right HR structures so that when there are challenges that has to do with performance, when there are challenges that has to do with people, we're able to support the organization in a very objective way. We're able to support the organization in a way that is free of bias, and we're able to support them to come to conclusions that would continue to build the organization's employer brand and help them to retain talent for the long term. I really hope that this has been an interesting session for you joining me. I have had a really great time just talking about this topic. HR is a topic that is very close to my heart, as you can tell, and I am very excited at the possibility of supporting other HR professionals to be very well positioned to help their organizations, help their teams, and help the whole team in the organization to continue to be productive and perform at work. Thank you so much for your spending time with me. I know we all have very busy schedules, but I've been really excited to spend this amount of time with us this evening. If there are questions, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to support us. And thank you very much for listening in. Have a lovely and great evening. Bye.